Yeah, all good, Eamon.
Okay. Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Ian Fitzgerald from Kerry GAA Coaching and Games. I'd like to welcome you to our third in a series of coaching webinars. We're delighted to have Keane, Kerry GAA physiotherapist, present to you this evening. Ger has a wealth of experience from working with numerous inter-county teams, including Kerry for the last 9 years, as well as numerous international athletes. At the end of the presentation, Kerry GAA Tom Joy will host a Q&A session with Ger. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, or if you'd just like to leave a comment, you can do so by using the text box on the side. Before we get going, we'll have some quick housekeeping rules that we'd like you to abide by. I suppose just please ensure it's vitally important, guys, that we just leave a smooth process here. So please ensure that your microphone and your camera are off at all times to avoid interruptions to the webinar. And also, like I've already covered, just make sure you, if you have any questions, to use the chat function at the side. That's basic, guys. Just a side note, Ger's camera will remain on throughout the presentation. Look, thank you for joining us this evening, and we hope you enjoy it. Over to you, Ger.
Thanks a million, Eamon. We can go to the first slide. Thanks very much. Real pleasure. I'm absolutely delighted to have the opportunity to try and give you my slant on COVID and what it's meaning to the sporting population in Ireland, and in particular the GAA population. And you'll see tonight I'm going to try and flip it on its back to start looking at the potentials that COVID can actually allow us to perceive. My own background, I have a clinic in the GAA Kerry Centre of Excellence in Kearns. My partner in the clinic is Julia Boost. Prior to that, I started out my career working in Harpen International Sports Injury Clinic, and I was lucky enough to deal with a lot of international athletes in that setting. Came down to Kerry then, and I was with the Kerry senior football team up until 2018, from 2011. And I'm with the Kerry minor football team and the Kerry senior hurlers at the moment. And I, again, was lucky enough to have, throughout that period, experience working with inter-county managers and teams from several different counties. And the end result of all of that is I've made incredible friends and a huge network of friends from that. So at the moment, educational background, I have a level 7 degree with physiotherapy and applied science. Studying again at the moment, doing a level 8 in Tralee IT in advanced athletic performance. And Julia in the clinic has a level 8 degree in physiology, and she also has a level 7 degree in physical therapy and applied science. So that's us. We'll go on to the next slide. Colin, thanks. Okay, so life after COVID, and how do we prepare for return to training and avoid injury when this happens? So the whole thing at the moment is, you can hold it there for a sec. The whole thing at the moment is COVID has been such a silent enemy, and it has changed the way the world works, to be honest. And that has been a huge mental strain on people's understanding of normality. And especially in the GAA world, where we were mid-league, you had all your pre-season training done. You were getting ready for peaking towards the end of the league and then moving forward into a championship from that. And quite literally within 2 days, the locks were on the gates and the rugs were pulled from under our feet. And it's incredible the industry that's there, and it's a sign of the level of education and knowledge that's available. On the strength and conditioning programs and the medical-based programs, we're able to come together and start putting together a new world for how long this lasts. And this slide, Enda King is a great friend of mine who is holds a PhD and works out of the sports surgery clinic in Santry, and he gave an excellent talk earlier in the week for the GPA, And he had these facts were in his presentation, and I found them so interesting because they're the real thing that causes the hearts to pound in the chests of everybody that's involved in preparing teams. So how quickly, and in fact, with players as well, because they're worried that will I lose it if I'm not using it? So how quickly does it take our fitness levels to degenerate? And then they explained that strength is greater than 30 days. This relates to a gym-based activity. So the stuff you do inside, lifting, weights, and so on. So suddenly I began to realize that's not too bad. And then conditioning is 15 to 18 days. And this relates to aerobic and anaerobic based training, which really is running, and probably skill based work could be thrown into that as well. And again, I looked at it and I said, we have a window here. This isn't drop off the cliff scenario at all. And then speed and power can go within 5 days. And that relates to maximum sprint and plyometric type activity, which can be used to promote and develop that. So in a strange way, I was pleased when I saw that slide from Enda, because I began to realize this, we can work with this. So we'll move on to the next slide, Colm. So it got me thinking, there's so much talk going on, and I got caught up in it for the first 2 weeks. And then I decided I'm going to stop looking at the news. I was like a phone freak trying to see the next piece of information. So what is the main problem here? It's like a prison sentence, but we don't know when we're going to be released. And that's creating all this nervous energy. And what happens is that there's huge distraction from white noise experts. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way. I mean that people are genuinely worried, and everybody is trying to supply everybody else with the next piece of information that they know. And unfortunately, the easiest way to get information is from the social media. And we began to realize after a period of time that was creating a huge washing machine cycle of this is going to happen, no, this is going to happen. And what happened was it created an exhaustive and a passive view on life. We were filling the days with unproductive and busy work, and that was exhausting. And bear in mind with GAA athletes, both club and intercounty, they are used to busy work in their lives. In fact, their lives have had to work around training, an intercounty schedule, whether you're with club or county now, and trying to live a life where you're earning a living, and try to live a life where you have a family to come home to and be there and present for all of that. So this was gone in the space of 2 days, and it was replaced with this incredible energy of, look, what's going to happen here? So I boiled it down to that the main problem is that we don't know when this is going to stop. So we'll go into the next slide. Thanks a million, Colm. No, there's one more before that. Go back again. There we go. So, oh no, keep going. Go on again. All right. So the players that are faced with this dilemma, by the way, you're going to see a lot of these, what are called infographics. So everything in this presentation is my own opinion, where I'm trying to base it on readings and papers. And I've thrown up these infographics, and you'll see the actual paper is quoted on the top. So for anybody who wants to read into this and get some more information, these slides will all be available, and you can try and see where I was trying to get the information for my mindset on this. So this slide is mainly trying to tell people and athletes and players how to stay motivated and follow your adaptive training plan during self-quarantine, this horrible word, quarantine. So the first thing was acceptance. So you've got to accept that things have changed. You're not able to pick up your kit bag, meet the lads, train hard, be told what to do, get checked out by the medical team, get advice from the strength and conditioning, get game tactics from the coaches, and finish off the session with a lot of positivity. That's all gone. So we've got to accept that it's gone. And now we've got to try and figure out ways that we can adapt to this. Number two there was, I think this is interesting because it helps us to define what kind of an athlete and person we want to be in this challenging situation. And I think that's really interesting because we're going to be faced with challenges in every single training session, and more importantly, in every single game. We don't get an awful lot of opportunity in a regular season to really grapple with this. No, there are scenarios set up in team meetings and with team psychologists trying to recreate what you'll try and do to bring the best decision out of you in a pressurized situation. We're living it every day here. So I look at this as a real opportunity to sit down and figure this out. Number 3 there was identify opportunities. This SMART situation in training is have specific, measurable, attainable, and relevant and time-phased goals. It's in every single educational college. When you're trying to create programs, you want to use the SMART principle. Well, players should try and get to figure out what's the smart way I can train here. How can I get off the treadmill of the empty noise, the white noise, and start changing my mindset into calming down, and let's see, how can I actually make this work for me? Not just survive, but actually make it a positive. And that's a real message I want to get across tonight. So to help them do that, keep schedules. It's important. Daily routines, plan your training. My early part of my career was with athletes. And so athletes are individuals. And they actually have to, they quite naturally plan their training month, their week, and their training day. So they work off schedules and they know what they're going to do tomorrow morning before they wake at all. And to see that in action is amazing, because it seems like a restrictive lifestyle, but it's a very, very rewarding lifestyle for the athlete, because it's an ongoing check that they're meeting their goals. So that's the type of scenario that we've got to try and get our minds into. In fact, the very last session that we had with the minors, it was something that I said in the dressing room, that we have a real chance to operate as elite athletes, while above all else remaining safe and keeping ourselves away from this terrible illness that's hit us, or hit the world really. Number 5, very important, reconnect with your long-term goal. What made you want to pick up a ball and kick it as a young lad up against the gable wall? The desire you had back then was probably more potent and had more potential than any of the desires that you'd have to walk up the steps of the Hogan stand. And try and reconnect with that young guy and try and figure out, why do you do what you're doing, and why did you start it at all? Number 6, practice your sport mentally. You'll have been told that so many times about visualizing. It's a great opportunity. What I'm finding here is what's giving us all this opportunity. For the first time in maybe a player's career, they're time rich. No inter-county or club player has been time rich since they really hit the standards. And now it is a chance to start doing these things and still have time to sit down and have a cup of tea with the missus at the end of the night. Number 7, I love it. Stay engaged emotionally. Connect with your teammates. Everyone's struggling. Great, you can get out of the struggle when you're trying to help somebody else. So get on the phone, check in with them, see how they're getting on, have a chat, have a bit of crack. This is where social media can really help, because there are so many apps that you can actually train as a virtual group now. And I'll talk about this later. But that is a really important point, because it is so easy to have a roller coaster day. Even if you're on top of this, you will have dips and troughs and peaks, I call them. And if you find yourself hitting a trough, get up and pick up the phone and have a chat with some fella that you know is going to make you laugh, or else pick up a fella that you know could be actually feeling worse than I'm feeling, and I want to try and get him feeling good, and suddenly you're feeling good as well. And then finally, number 8, as a whole, feel grateful to be able to physically be active. Now that sounds very, altruistic or whatever, but I think it's awful important that instead of use the word grateful there, I use the word feel lucky. Begin to feel lucky, and really do feel lucky, and begin to realize this is an opportunity for me to start doing things and still have downtime in the week. So they were the type of motivations that I liked, that were offered for players that are finding themselves going through this. We'll flick on to the next one, Colin. Thanks. So the big question, will we be back? How many times do we have an answer for it? I'm on the phone so often to the two different intercounty managers, and I have the greatest piece of information and knowledge and wisdom about what's going to happen. The actual answer, nobody has a clue. And in the best words of Forrest Gump, and that's all I have to say about that, there's no point in rattling that tin anymore. If people people will have an opinion, or people will have a hope, or people will have a desire, stay away from it. The heart rate starts pounding. Probably the biggest thing is going to get you to do is, at some stage within the 3.5 minutes, you're going to feel absolutely like crap, because you'll feel, not, this isn't going to happen at all. So forget it. Don't entertain it. We do not know when we're going to be back. Okay, so we'll go on to the next one, Colm, please. So this for me is way more important. Constants. The only constant that we do know is that the current restriction deadlines are the current restriction deadlines as they are updated by the health and government guidelines. They are definite. We know until the 5th of May, we are in this scenario of rules. And we quite happily live by them, with the hope that more people will be able to live through this attack. These should form the time frame for our short-term training potential. This is where we get busy. There's no point in thinking beyond the 5th of May at the moment. We should be in a training schedule that works to that deadline. And what happens after that? The next piece of the jigsaw is going to be revealed to us, and then we periodize the training after that again. Our training attention works in these known variables. So work to what you know, not to what can be. We'll try the next one. So section 2. So now I'm going to go into, in the normal world, the world that we lived in before St. Patrick's Day, how was training load? What were the principles behind training load? What was the significance of training load? Gets a little bit sciencey here, but I think it's important for everyone to understand this. And then I'll try and break it down to how you can use that idea, even if you're a club player on your own with very little support, that you can actually begin to think along these principles. Although I think in the modern world, there are very few people that will be that isolated. So I just want to reference here that Tim Gabbett, practically all the information I'm putting up was from Tim Gabbett. We were so fortunate in Kerry that he was down with us and stayed with us for 2 days, courtesy of Jason McGahan, head of strength and conditioning in Kerry. And Tim is an absolute world leader in all of this knowledge. So we'll go on to the next slide and I'll talk you through it. Thanks a million. So we're going to look at just section E at the moment on the left-hand side of that diagram. So Tim Gabbett talks about the basement, the floor, and the ceiling. So the basement is where most people are pre-season, where you've come back. Probably the biggest unfortunate thing is that intercounty players and club players, pre-season, there's no such thing really. There is no downtime. But let's base it off an intercounty team that they haven't been seen for 3 months. And so that's the basement. So the red line is the training load that you need to do to get to the ceiling. And what's the ceiling? The ceiling is the next aim in the program. So which will ultimately aim. So if you're talking about the league, the ceiling would be ultimately that you're performing at your peak for a league final. And then mini ceilings throughout that as you plan throughout the months. So there's a red dotted line there going up to the ceiling from the basement. So basically that's telling us if we did no preparation, if we did no training, and we just decided this is how hard we need to train, and we just went in and went for it, that line is too steep. A lot of injuries will occur around that line. You'll have people that just won't be able to be robust, which is they won't be able to access more than 80% of their training session. So he recognizes that we need to get the basement up to the floor, and there's a period of time pre-season training that allows the players to adapt and to get to know where everybody is, and that's the floor. And you'll see that the curve then becomes less steep, and it allows the strength and conditioning and the trainers and the managers to try and achieve what they want to achieve without players dropping like flies due to repetitive strain injuries. So we'll come back to the F in a minute. So if you go on to the next slide, Colm, thanks a million. So we're still looking at the same diagram, but I love this quote from Lou Holtz. It's not the load that breaks you down, it's the load you're not prepared for. And you'll see that, and I'll quote him again later on the slide. So the thing that allows the curve or the slope not to be so steep is the bottom line, the time continuum on the horizontal axis, or on the bottom line there. So in the ideal world, the time is enough that the slope isn't too steep and it'll let you go from the floor to the ceiling and achieve your aims. However, if the time isn't the time allowed or the time available isn't long enough, you'll see that the slope becomes too steep, and that's where injury potential arises. We're going to see later on in the slides that there is a way you can manage the load to see if any players are potentially falling into the hazard of starting to climb a slope that's a bit steep for them at the moment. Because remember, one size doesn't fit all. The plan is just the plan. And these, no matter how fancy these seem, all that ever matters is what happens when fellas get on their boots and they kick at the studs on the dressing room floor and when they get out onto the pitch. And it's the real time of what's going on in front of you is really all that matters. And all of these are just ways of trying to manage that in a way that makes sense to the people organizing the program, to the managers, and to the players who are having to do the work, so that they can understand why they're doing it and why maybe it's not working for them or why it is. So then if I go to the far right there on the C, you'll see that if time can be increased, we can hit the ceiling in a really positive slope that minimizes chronic injuries. I keep using the word overuse of chronic. They're the injuries that are a pain in the backside for any manager. It's a decent thing to get a broken bone. I always say that. Well, it's not the nicest thing, but for an injury, because it's something has happened, you understand what happened, you know what you have to do to get it right, you get out and on you go. But it's the injury that happens, like a hamstring pull or a hamstring strain, groin strains, calf strains, you're back, you're in again, and then it might go later in the season, and suddenly as a player you're feeling intrepid, you don't know, maybe I should hold back my own power here because I'm afraid this will go again, and all of that washing machine cycle. So to remember that it's not the load, it's the load you're not prepared for, and that's what this graph is trying to explain to you, and you'll see in a minute how we can use figures to try and help players to stay on the positive slope, or the slope that doesn't break them down. So we'll go on again, Colm. All right, so there we are, the original diagram that we spoke about earlier, and now we'll go to F. And this is euphoria, really. So what it means is another way that you can have that slope less steep, remember the steep slope equals more possibility of injury, is to raise the floor. But what you need to raise the floor is more time in the pre-season. What do we have? Loads of it. I see huge opportunity here. In fact, the funny thing is, in speaking to the managers and the strength conditioning guys, there are so many things that players can actually do at the moment, and their apps, the people that are giving them the work to do are so delighted because they don't ever get the opportunity to do this. So we have a real potential to raise the floor here because time is on our side. We are time rich. So we'll move on to the next one. Next slide. Thanks, Colm. So here we have Lou Holtz. Well, listen, come here. If anybody wants to have a couple of quotes to impress their neighbours, definitely this is a guy to look up in the website. So life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you respond to it. Flip it on its back, turn it and change it from the washing machine cycle of empty white noise into we can actually use this for a potential opportunity. Move on. We'll go on to the next one. Thanks, Colm. All right. Bit sciencey here again. I think I just want to talk you through it. So this begins to tell us how we can monitor training load. It's becoming something, this is something that more and more people are becoming familiar with. Certainly every inter-county player and backroom staff, it's the engine really that drives the success and how hard they can drive players. And with clubs, I'm finding that there are so many incredibly good strength and conditioning and coaches, strength and conditioning people and coaches available at club level, mainly due to the incredible work being done in the universities to offer courses that allow people to get very good grounding in education and make a huge difference. I think Ireland will become a leading force in that down the line, to be honest. But let's go through this. Training load monitoring in team sports. So the fitness and fatigue are the two sides of training load. And there are two systems within the body that this can happen to. You have the physiological system, which means your heart, your lungs, your energy state, and your fuel. And then you have the biomechanical, which pretty much means everything that a muscle attaches to, whether it's muscle joint or mechanics, or the way they all come together to get you to move. So then you have a concept called an external load and an internal load. So external loads would be pretty much the demands that training put on the system. So on the physiological system, it would be speed thresholds, a distance, like your heart tells you, okay, this is as far as I can take you today, buddy. You're going to have to take a rest and I'll give a shot at it again when I've recovered. Internal loads then would be when energy systems change from being oxygen dependent into being cellular dependent. And these are measured through scientific aids doing VO2 max, blood lactates, and here's the other one, rate of perceived effort. And this is a thing that, again, every single intercounty player, minor, senior, or whatever, they're beginning to understand how to record these rates of perceived effort, because they do have a factor in determining the load that a particular and individual player is experiencing through sessions. If we go over to the biomechanical one, external loads are whole body loads. Like when your body hits the ground, what's it doing to your joints and your muscles? When you accelerate, when you decelerate, what's happening in your joints and muscles? Speed, rate of acceleration, all of these are external loads on your biomechanical system. And internally then, it's what's happening under the skin, in your joints, in your muscles, soft tissue damage, and again, perceived effort is measured in this at the end of training sessions. Literally what that means is somebody goes around, they're assigned that they go around and they have a card in front of them and they ask them, tell us what was it like tonight? And the players know it. And the important thing with that is that you try and always keep the rate of perceived effort recording real. The player is exhausted, but you try and explain to him that this is actually really important. Take a second to think about it. Don't worry about what the guy next door said to you. This is about you. This becomes your training load. And players love education. And once they know what they're trying to achieve, they do it very well. So then we go down to the bottom graph here. We have failure, overload, homeostasis, and underload. The two ones that we can manage or modulate are the overload and the underload. Underload seems to be safe enough, lads. I can never go wrong if I underload. No, forget that. Underload has as much potential for injury as overload. Failure is when something unfortunate happens. You're jumping for a ball. A guy comes in from the side and railroads you and he buckles your knee in two, and we know the unfortunate incident there when he's carted off and he has to have an ACL repaired. Within the physiological system, failure can be, well, what better example can we have than this COVID-19? If you're unfortunate enough to get that, you can forget about training for a while. Overload is when the load you're putting on the body, your particular body isn't able to accept it. So your heart is saying, listen, give me a chance here. I'm shutting down. I can't do any more here. We're going to shut this session down and give me a chance to adapt to it. If you don't allow adaptation, you'll get overload. And it's the same with the soft tissues. You'll get connective tissue damage and muscle strain. And that's the beginning of that horrible scenario of the guy his hamstrings are always dodgy. Homeostasis. It's where every strength and conditioning coach, team coach and manager and player wants to be at, where the adaptations of your physiological system are being challenged. That's awful important. Don't go on the same side, safe side. They have to be challenged. And it's allowing all the tendon stiffness to regenerate and allow more potential. Remember, our bodies adapt and allow us to do more than we were able to do the previous week when we do it with the correct load. And that's where that slope comes in again. And the underload, well, the problem is you get muscle wastage, you get more than likely weight is put on, and you get decreased tendon stiffness and more play in joints and more injury. So that would give you the scenario of digging a deep, deep basement to try and come out of there. So that's kind of the understanding of the background of the science behind that. We go on to the next one before the quality. All right. So then this is Tim Gabbett's way of measuring load. Are we actually able to get on the slope and climb the slope in a safe way? And remember, it's all about robustness. There is no such thing as euphoria in any team. So don't ever plan a session fearing that somebody is going to get injured. The law of averages is you are going to have outliers. Outliers are the people on either side of the 80% robustness. So it's typically outliers. Young players would be under stress because they're training hard. They're trying to work so hard when they come in on the senior situation. They're afraid to do anything but do their best, and that creates overload. And you have the older players who quite literally need sometimes more time to recover, but that doesn't mean that you drop into the basement of undertraining. And that's where the incredible work that the likes of Jason and Niall and the seniors do, and all of the inter-county backroom strength conditioning teams and training teams. And now at this stage, the medical teams get involved in that as regards trying to keep injured players as much part of that continuum as possible. So load is measured in units, including following examples: the duration of a session, the intensity of a session, the rate of perceived effort. Often that's decided. So duration is how long the session goes on. Intensity means if you've got sprint sessions, how much sprinting. Now, the beautiful thing is in inter-county systems, they have GPS. It literally gives you that information. But in clubs where you don't have GPS, you can work it out from the distance that you've run and the intensity that you ran at. Rate of perceived effort, that's the thing the player fills in at the end. It is so important to getting an individual score that allows that player to remain robust. And in the gym, it's the weight lifted sets and reps. It's a bit easier to manage an understanding of the loads in that. So then you've got this thing, acute on chronic load. So acute load is if you add up all those, you multiply, for instance, if your weights for one night was 100 kg, 5 times, 500 times, that's 1,500. So that's an acute load. So what you do is you add that up over the week. The chronic load is that divided by 4 weeks, giving you the average over the 4 weeks. So the acute load is what it is on 1 week, and the chronic load is added up over the 4 weeks and divided by 4. The acute chronic workload ratio, which gives us that figure to decide if somebody is actually able to remain on that slope of enlightenment to where they need to go. That's the key figure. And the figure is achieved by dividing the acute load by the chronic load. So for instance, if your acute load for a week was 1,000 units, if your acute load for the month was 4,000 units, you divide one by the other, and you'll get a figure that will give you the figures that relate to the graph here on the right side. So the ratio number that's in the blue there, which is typically from about 0.7, and it goes up to 1.5 when you start to go into the danger zone, that's the sweet spot. And if players can remain in that zone, even though you're training them hard, you continue to train them. The ones that begin to drop on either side of it, either because they're under training, it's interesting to see that the likelihood of injury when you do less is higher than, like, when you'll have a better chance of remaining uninjured when you train, in other words. It allows you to remain on that workload projection that the training staff want you to be on. So if we move on to the next slide. Okay, so I like this slide because it was just nothing to do with COVID. It was just talking about pre-season, because in my mind, we are in a kind of a groundhog day of pre-seasons at the moment, although we can periodize those within reason as each piece of COVID is unfolding. But if we just go right down to the conclusion there, So the conclusion was that many other factors contribute to in-season injury rates, but teams that performed a greater number of pre-season training sessions had healthier in-season periods. In fact, the training attendance was greater than 14%, and match availability was greater than 10%. So for me, we have time on our side. Here's another opportunity. We move on to the next one. Great. So section 3, how do we adapt the training, the traditional training models within these new constraints with a view to a future return date? So the general areas that are in any training week for a player, you have strength, generally twice a week. You have conditioning, aerobic, anaerobic, game specific. Generally that happens on the field sessions, which is twice a week if you on a game at the weekend, or else training 3 times a week. Plyometric speed and agility is generally put into that. You could have a session done on a field session, and sometimes it can be done in a gym session. You've got to spread those out because they can be intensive. And then you've got the injury rehabilitation and prevention. So the players that have been injured, and you're trying to get them as much streamlined to that program and work them through the injury. So if we move on to the next slide. Thanks, Colin. Okay, so if we think about resistance training, and I found this really interesting, what this showed was they trained somebody for 16 weeks, 3 days a week, and they found that then for 32 weeks, they reduced the dose. With one of them, they trained once a week, and with the other group, they just trained once every 2 weeks. And what was really interesting was, if you go down to number 1 at the bottom, the strength gained during phase 1 was largely retained throughout the detraining, with only a slight reduction in both the people that just trained once a week and the people that trained once a fortnight. Obviously, the people that trained once a week, their levels were higher, but there wasn't a massive drop from where they started 32 weeks earlier. And interesting muscle hypertrophy, which is the number of muscle fibers, developing those. Both the maintenance prescription, a reduced dose, 1/3 and 1/9, preserved phase 1 muscle hypertrophy. That's incredible. And in fact, in the 1/3 dose, the maintenance added to increased muscle hypertrophy. So it made me feel I'm not too worried here. As long as players realize that they need to do some work, it's not just work for the sake of it. This is actual real work. So we'll move on again. Okay, it was the same with sprinting. Again, I looked at a healthy, normal situation. And it shows that they were looking at sprint versus isolated eccentric training. Eccentric training is something, if we look on a hamstring, it comes in an awful lot in hamstring injuries. And they looked at games only, games with just a strength, and then a sprint and games. And again, what they found, I'll go right down to the conclusion, the sprint training was superior to the Nordics, which is the strength, in order to increase the muscle length, the fascicle length, which is a very important factor in preventing re-injury. And only the sprint training was able to both provide a preventive stimulus and an increase in fascicle length. And again, this is wonderful because we have a chance to actually train and recover because we're time rich. Move on to the next one. Thanks, Colin. Okay, I threw in this slide because it's a bit, it doesn't really apply to us. It applies to the NFL. The only other scenario in the world that this has been like with this lockdown was in the NFL. So in 2011, they had a lockout from March to, I can't see it there because my icon is in the way. But for a major part of their season, they had a lockout, actually March to August. So normally that would have been your pre-season. There would have been lots of work done. And what they found in a normal pre-season in the blue section above, they had two Achilles injuries pre-season and then 5 ruptures per year generally after that. However, in the year that the lockout was there, they had 12 ruptures in 1 month. Now, I think that's because these are professionals being paid loads of money. They weren't allowed, very like what we're going through at the moment, they weren't allowed to communicate with coaches, doctors, or strength and conditioning. So what did they do instead? They lay on the couch, watch TV, and had a good time. Suddenly the season came on, they were back in and they started training, and you got all these problems. Tendons need load. That's quite simply, that's the key to that. And that's, again, why the work we're doing, even though you have more time in your hands, is key to allowing you to be a more robust player when you come back. Let's move on again, Colin. Plyometrics. a wonderful way of developing tendon stiffness. I'm finding at the moment, I'm learning a lot in college, and both through we're studying UKSCA strength conditioning again through the guise of Jason in the head of strength and conditioning in Kerry, and we're actually going forward to try and do exams. But we're beginning to learn that plyometrics have a huge role to play in creating robustness in a player. And you can add this in as a warm-up activation even, and it has a huge significance in creating tendon stiffness and health in the tendon. There is a warning down there that excessive training volumes can induce neuromuscular impairments. So what they're saying is we need adequate recovery between sessions. Here we go again, another opportunity within the COVID breakdown. We'll move on again. So if overuse injury is a training load error, should undertraining be viewed the same way? My view is absolutely yes. So do not feel sorry for ourselves in COVID. And the people I know or deal with, I know very few people do, but it's hard to stay motivated. Train within reason, because if you undertrain, you're digging a deeper basement to come out of. Let's move on. And then the tips for developing resilience, because that is so key. It's pretty similar to what we had in the first slide, but this time, it's take time to accept the process. Recognize the availability of social support. Be proactive in your personal development. Develop beyond what you normally know. Do other things. Be more available to your family at home. So many times I'm hearing the phrase from people that I know are always so busy, it's great to be at home with the kids. And then they tell me after 5 minutes, geez, I do with a break from the kids. But you know what I'm saying. Be sensitive to different types of motivation, internal and external. Motivate yourself. Look to others for motivation. Motivate others. To foster resilience in others, carefully provide an appropriate balance of challenge and support. Challenge is key. Feedback. Let them be excited about telling you what you did. And there's so much positivity going on in groups on that front. Reflect on what you can control and what you cannot control. We spoke about it so often tonight. For the situations you cannot control, develop a challenge mindset by taking responsibility of your own reactions. I love this scenario. You tell the same story to two people, exactly the same thing happens to two people, exactly the same thing. They tell the story to two different people. The story those two people tell of exactly the same event will more than likely be completely different. And what it depended on was how the person that experienced the story related it. And what I love is, and I think it's hugely powerful, we have complete control over how we view a situation and how we relate, how it affects us. Regulate your thoughts by telling someone about your thinking. Don't keep it in your head. Talk about it. Tell somebody you're feeling like crap. Tell somebody that you think the whole world is after finishing. Tell somebody that you think this isn't so bad. Let's move on again. We're nearly there now. So section 4, take-home messages. One size does not fit all. It's key, and that's why I put in the minor team in there in the picture. Consider the player and his or her individual needs first. That's key. Some players could be in a knot over this. Some players could be coming off a period of exhaustion before this kicked in at all. Accept it. Begin to have a chance to look at it. Why did this happen? What we spoke about earlier. Why did we actually kick the gable into the wall with the ball in the first place? Player sport age directs the program application. What that means is that more senior players may not need as much hands-on as the minor group. Minor groups love to be told, this is the time of the day I want you to do the session, and they know that everybody is doing it at the same time. They love to be given challenges. They love to be given timelines throughout the week of what to do. And what's so important, and I know that James, our manager of the minor team, relates it all back to the importance of keep safe, keep healthy, keep doing the stuff at home that makes you a better person at home, and keep studying. He intermingles that all the time with the younger players. Life, reality. Player backroom support has to be ever constant. I find that we are on non-stop on the phone. I suppose half of that is egotistical as well. But we're finding we're in communication with the backroom. There's an awful lot of thoughts and ideas of how to make this productive and enjoyable for players. the big thing is every player should know that the work they're being given is not token work. This is actual work that will help to give them an opportunity to be a better player before they started in the first place. Psychological and social support is key. And psychological support could be a fella texting a guy or ringing him saying, geez, you sound a bit caught up there. Is there anything, just normal talk with fellas and let them change it into a bit of crack at the end of the call. And we'll go into the next slide. So the final message: focus on defined goals, opportunity, not losses. Periodize with each COVID announcement. Include recovery weeks. Rest well, recover well, feel lucky, train well, but above all, train. And I love this quote from Kobe Bryant. The important thing is your teammates have to know you're pulling for them and you really want them to be successful. So we have such an opportunity to become cohesive groups through this incredible situation that we find ourselves in. Thank you very much.
Hi, Joe. How are things? Can you hear me?
I can. Is that Tom?
Yeah. How are you doing?
Great.
Thanks very much for that. There was a lot of great points in it, and I'm sure all the coaches got plenty to take home messages from it anyway. So I suppose just a few questions, if you don't mind, before we finish up.
No problem.
So I suppose these are questions that kind of came in over the last couple of hours. So I suppose from your own, what have you found works best in your current situation from working with the Kerry hurlers and the Kerry minors?
Okay, it's interesting because it's two completely different ways of approaching it. James is incredibly good at understanding that these are young guys who are still studying and who have to remain safe. But what he finds works is that he gives them the time of the day he wants them to do the session. He keeps it fun. He gives them challenges. The feedback from the support that he gets from the strength and conditioning and the medical team coming up with ideas. But the big thing is that it's focused towards a goal. It's not just token work. So with younger players, they may need more structure. With older players, for instance, with the senior hurlers, what's incredible is that some of them are still working. Some of them are studying, which is key. But to a man, they all arrive up at they put up pictures or videos of what they're doing, which keeps them in touch with the group. Everybody sees what they're doing. And with the seniors, we find that Zoom call sessions are excellent, where it's a group scenario. They can hear comments from the managers, from the backroom team, from the selectors, and it creates a bit of a bond. And more importantly, that they do realize they're actually getting places with it.
Yeah, fair point. I suppose a big question that everyone's kind of concerned with now, without the gym sessions, how do you think people could work on this kind of access at home?
Okay, so it's a very good point. So when you don't have the load, now a lot of people have been lucky that they've been able to access some weight, and some weight is okay. Some weight is good. And in most scenarios in the intercounty scene, players have been provided with, sandbags, weighted bags, and weighted resistant bands. So when you can't lift heavy, this notion of time under tension, which means take longer through the motion with resisted bands, can actually maintain. Remember that curve that we showed you, that graph? You can maintain your levels by doing work like that. And in general, both Mark Aiden in the hurlers and in the minors, and John in the hurlers are coming up with incredible varied programs that allow all the muscle groups to be hit, and you can come up with an exercise routine that's